Hi, and welcome to No Place Like It, a podcast on fictional homes. I'm your host, Talia Oleg, and together we'll be exploring the ins and outs of imagined living spaces. Today, we are in 1920s Russia, and a Bolshevik tribunal has just sentenced Alexander Rostov to house arrest in the Metropole Hotel, where he will remain for the rest of his life. I promise there are no spoilers ahead, so there's no immediate need to have read A Gentleman in Moscow, but I would encourage you to get your hands on a copy anyways, as it is a delightful read. I first read this book in January 2020 and thought it was just a really good novel where a character lived in one place and was not allowed to leave. As we all know, March 2020 was a huge change for the world's population, and I very quickly learned what it was like to live in one place and not be allowed to leave. The situations may not be directly comparable. If Alexander steps out of the hotel, he will be shot, whereas I faced no such threat if I stepped out of my home. However, I did face the possibility of spreading a potentially deadly infection among the masses, so you tell me which is worse. The Metropole Hotel opened its doors in 1905, so by the time Alexander is sentenced to house arrest there in 1922, it's a fairly young hotel. And yes, it's a real place, but as the story is fictional, I'll allow it. Plus, this is my podcast and I'm drunk with power. The hotel seems rather more like a mall-hotel combo than strictly a hotel. It has 2 restaurants, 1 bar, a barber shop, and a newsstand. There is also a card room, a ballroom, a seamstress's stitching room, and there also used to be a flower shop, but it closed in 1920. For purposes of our discovery, why don't we venture to the 2nd floor of the hotel, specifically the northeast corner? Here is one of the hotel's dining halls. It's said to be the finest restaurant in Moscow and possibly all of Russia. It is called the Boyarsky, and it has vaulted ceilings and dark red walls. Its servers wear white dinner jackets, offering a stark contrast to the dark walls, which allows the waiters to stand out, in turn signifying the restaurant's pride in their service. When the Boyarsky has an influx of guests, due to a few European countries recognizing the USSR, they find themselves a bit short-staffed. A waiter is promoted from the other restaurant in the hotel. This waiter is a terrible server, and Alexander immediately speaks to a staff member of the Boyarsky. He says he supposes a lack of experience is fine in the other restaurant, but this new waiter is not up to the Boyarsky's high standard. We don't know if it was the result of Alexander talking to the maître d', but this waiter does not remain at the Boyarsky for long, and soon Alexander himself is to have a hand in maintaining the restaurant's service standards. Now that we've seen the excellence of the Boyarsky, we'll go downstairs to the lobby where the 2nd restaurant is located. The hotel's other restaurant is called the Metropole Hall, but Alexander calls it the Piazza. In his eyes, it is not as elegant or sophisticated as the Boyarsky, but that was in the 1920s. In October 2021, almost 100 years after the start of Alexander's story, the restaurant was awarded a Michelin star, so those of you traveling to Russia might want to check it out. Though Alexander thinks it is not as classy as the Boyarsky, he loves the place and tells an architect that it was, quote, designed to be and has been a gathering place for the entire city of Moscow. The restaurant sets the tone for the rest of the city, as it is the first to set up Christmas decorations. It is also here that a first date takes place, where former aristocrats clash with the serving classes, and where 2 potential lovers bond over the orchestra's rendition of the Nutcracker. Also located next to the lobby is the hotel bar, the Shalyapin. Before the revolution, it was regularly full of people and buzzing with activity, but by 1922, it has become more of a chapel for reflection, albeit a chapel with booze. One such reflection concerns Alexander thinking of things Russia has contributed to Western culture. In a conversation with an Englishman and a German, he lists some famous Russian persons and works of art, and after each entry on the list, all three gentlemen have a drink of vodka. It's a quiet scene full of Alexander's love for his country, and it stands in contrast to another scene in the bar, which takes place 4 years later. The Shalyapin is soon taken over by jazz, a decidedly American music. There are also foreign correspondents to be found in the bar every night, with Russian spies posing as hostesses, hanging on to the journalists' every word. These two scenes are in complete opposite to each other, from quiet to noisy, from a Russian man engaging in conversation with a couple foreigners, to a Russian woman spying on groups of aliens, from friendly to suspicious. It's a change that is heavily marked by the political climate happening outside of the hotel, and that also conveys the passage of time. Thus far, house arrest in a hotel sounds a bit better than lockdown in a house or apartment, especially with 2 restaurants and a fully stocked bar. When one has to stay in one place for a while, there's a kind of stasis that comes with seeing the same surroundings every single day. And with that stasis comes nostalgia for the time when things were in flux. As such, Alexander spends a great deal of time reminiscing about his younger days, days when he wasn't confined to the limits of the hotel. The hotel itself often prompts these musings, such as the coat room where he sees some fur coats and is immediately transported back to his childhood when his grandmother hosted fancy dinners at the family estate. A dinner of fish prompts a young woman's recollections of a fishing village, which in turn influences Alexander's reminiscing of his own childhood days in a forest of apple trees. He has only to touch the drapes and gaze out the window of a room, and he is deep in the memory of a friend's birthday party. His mind frequently escapes to the past, to the days before his house arrest, but especially to the days before the revolution. Counteracting this nostalgia is the presence of a child in the Count's life, one who keeps him tethered to the present rather than the past. He befriends a little girl named Nina, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say she befriends him. Nina approaches the Count in the first year of his imprisonment and immediately establishes herself as part of his life. She takes him on adventures all over the hotel, adventures on which he learns to see the metropole through a child's eyes. Alexander learns of rooms beyond the ones where he usually goes, of secret doors, of cupboards where one can hide and listen to old ladies gossip while they play cards. With this new insight into the hotel's layout, he finds a hidden room next to his 100 square foot space in the attic, and can therefore expand his personal area, which he likely would never have discovered had he not learned from Nina that there are, quote, rooms behind rooms. By expanding Alexander's limited view of the hotel, Nina helps him to stay in the present rather than slipping into a nostalgic remembrance of his life before house arrest. Nina herself will grow up and leave the hotel, but she is not the only child who changes Alexander's life. By 1938, Alexander has been at the hotel 16 years and has become accustomed to the size of his attic, which accommodates his morning exercise routine. But when he has to take care of a 6-year-old child, his perception of the attic size is thrown. His daily routine is interrupted and his space reconfigured. Like Nina, this child, whose name is Sophia, also challenges his understanding of the hotel's geographical limits, but always appearing where he does not expect her. Sophia plays a little game where, once Alexander has left their rooms to go somewhere else in the hotel, he always finds that she has arrived before he does. The hotel's secret passageways and shortcuts are known to her, and this knowledge, coupled with her very presence in his life, brings surprise and levity to Alexander's routine, which has become well established after 16 years in the same place. During the first few years of his imprisonment, Alexander notes the passage of time by paying close attention to the ticking of the clock. Once it's been a decade or so, he notes the same passage of time through observing the graying hairs of hotel employees. He goes from observing the seconds and minutes to watching the months and years. For Alexander, the changes of time are slowing down in the hotel. But outside the hotel, the changes in Moscow and the rest of Russia are moving quickly. These contrasts come to a head when Alexander has a loved one in need of medical help. He indicates a hospital which used to be reputable, only to find its medical services have fallen in quality over the years, the same years he has spent in the metropole. In this, we see the true punishment of his house arrest is that the passage of time is happening regardless of his static existence. In 2 weeks, we return to the 1920s to stay at another hotel, but this time we will be traveling to the French Riviera of F. Scott Fitzgerald's Tender is the Night. The script and research references for today's episode are available at acutelittleshop.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, rate, and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever platform you use for podcasts. Thank you so much for listening.